We got BT over there. Good. Right, and just give us a yell when you want us to stop recording.
Okay, I guess as good as time as any.
We're going.
So, good afternoon, everybody. This is What the Fuck, Seriously, oh for fuck's sake, Incident Response Life. My name is Mark Boltz Robinson. I'm a senior consultant doing digital forensics and incident response, more of the incident response and less of the digital forensics for the Foundstone team at McAfee. Once and former Intel Security, McAfee again, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Over 25 years in IT, 20 of those in information security, co-founder of B-Sides and Sage Fedora on Twitter. So for my job, mostly incident response these days, so going in as a first responder when somebody's really totally borked their network, usually with ransomware, figuring out what happened, cleaning it up, triage, remediation, and so on. Why I continually do this? Because so many organizations, despite all the good people out there like you that do information security, many of them are really, really dumb. They do this very, very poorly. I go in and I take a look at their SIM. They've got thousands and thousands of unacknowledged alarms that everybody's ignoring. Great. It's really hard to underestimate the amount of stupid that you can have in an organization when it comes to incident response. So why is that? Why do we continually have these issues? Why do I continually have to do incident response? It's generally the maturity of the organization that we find an issue. Usually, when I first get to a site, my first greeting upon arrival is simply, fix it. Okay, so where's your incident response plan? Do you have an incident response plan? Yeah, that's our incident response plan. Running around saying, help, help, help. So, we look to the NIST IR lifecycle as a starting point. It's basically a framework of 4 things that we do in incident response: preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery, post-incident activity, lather, rinse, repeat. What often happens instead of this nice flow in an organization is that because they don't have an incident response plan, heck, how many of you even been in organizations where they had a backup and disaster recovery plans? I see many where they have the backup part right, but they never test the backup restore. They never have the, or they don't usually have the disaster recovery part, or they have the DR part, but they never actually test it out to see, well, okay, how do we actually do this? Or if they do, okay, great. You just did DR. You called for disaster recovery. You failed over to your duplicate data center. Now, how do you fail back? Oh, whoops, we forgot that part. So, when it comes to this is the nice, pretty picture of the simple form of incident response that we would like. The reality is more like this. The middle parts are usually a whole lot of people running around panicking, because their machines are infected with ransomware and it's busy encrypting all of their network file shares as well as their backups. Case in point, a healthcare client in California. One of the things we noticed was that, this is a side note to the actual incident itself that we were responding to, they had a radiology system. You know, x-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, all that kind of fun stuff. It's communicating via TCP 2501 via the internet to the radiology provider, the people who make the system. Noticing the TCP 2501, and why is that even allowed out on your firewall instead of just allowing well-known services outbound? Well, it was also unencrypted, which meant that I could actually dissect radiology images. And I also caught cancel, confirm commands to the system. So I immediately thought of 2 fun things I could do with that. They were like, what's the big deal? I'm like, well, let's see. I can inject, cancel, confirm packets ad nauseum and commit a denial of service attack against the system. Or I could, I don't know, say, tweak the image files so that it looks like you don't have a tumor when you really do. Or vice versa, make it look like you have a tumor that you don't really have. And then they finally went, oh, well, okay, what do we do about that? Well, maybe you should talk to the provider to have them fix their shit. So, those are some of the fun things. You know what their IR plan was? They didn't have one. So they got hit with ransomware. The attackers demanded 40 Bitcoin to restore their systems. Since they didn't have an IR plan, several of the doctors wandered out of the medical center and talked to the press and said, oh my God, every system in the hospital is broken. They're demanding millions of dollars. And the media ran with it, of course. It was all over the news. Major hospital in California affected, patients are dying, and millions of dollars in ransom demanded, etc. Yeah, the actual ransom was actually $17,000. The actual systems affected, 12. Really? So the perception is that IR is easy, networks are simple. The reality is, of course, much, much different. But what happens then is we come into incident response, and not only are they so immature that they don't have an IR plan, they tend to panic when stuff goes wrong. They see what we do, and then all of a sudden it's like, we want to do IR. Let's buy FTK and encase and copy all the hard drives and do a 20-person SOC and hang up screens on the walls. We'll study pew-pew maps all day long. And we'll set up honeypots. Oh, well, wait a minute. Hang on a second. Let's step back here a second. Like, you're getting ahead of yourselves. You don't even have the IR plan yet, and now you want to buy all these toys that you just saw me use to fix your network, and you don't even understand how they work. So let's talk about the maturity. First thing I always tell clients is, first, you got to know where your data is, because I guarantee you don't. In 98% of every site I ever go to, the customer has no idea where their data is, even to this day. They think, oh, yeah, all this email is on Exchange servers. Say the security guys in our first meeting to discover what, the topology and architecture and everything. The network guys are like, no, we moved to Office 365 3 months ago. Oh, okay, well, why are you still seeing Exchange traffic on these servers? So know where your data is. Teaching them that then the second step is to know your network. And just in a recent Security Weekly podcast by Paul Asadorian, they noted Marcus J. Raynham was on, and he said that basically still to this day, people want to buy a Cisco box, plug it in, and have blinky green lights. They don't want to actually understand the network, and that's a huge problem. That's why we're still here in 2016, and we still have incident response, and we still have ransomware, and we still have buffer overflows, etc. You got to understand how this stuff works, and many organizations, you guys get this, but they don't, and it's astonishing to me. That's why I'm title of the presentation's like, what the fuck? Seriously. So, what protocols are expected? From and where should they be going? What protocols should not be expected? How is the DNS configured? Do you know how many organizations allow DNS outbound to anything from anywhere? It's amazing. How should it be configured? Well, you should go to their DNS servers, which should forward to the root servers, etc. Control that. I see even in network and systems management, the guys who supposedly should know better. TeamViewer, WhatsApp Gold, RDP, VNC, SSH. Now, not all of these are bad, of course. I SSH all the time. It's sound protocol. But now, of course, you have to know where should you see SSH, because it's also a great protocol to hide things. Do you know that for a protocol written in 1973, how absolutely astonishingly common it is for Telnet to still exist on internal networks? Why? Why are we not getting through to these people as InfoSec people to get people to understand that you should not have Telnet on your network in 2016? Really? Come on. So, David Bianco wrote a great blog post a while back, and he came up with the pyramid of pain. The idea of this is that we have all the different indicators that you can see on a network, and if you apply these effectively, we can solve a lot of these problems. The problem is, guess where 99% of all organizations are? Healthcare, legal, etc. For the most part, I don't care, especially the ones you hear the most. Retail, healthcare, restaurants and food services and that type of thing, especially financial services is a bit better at this. The government's pretty good at this. But most of them are here. They've just discovered that hashes are a cool thing. But that's the easy part. If you just look for hash values, it's trivial for your attacker to bypass your detection mechanisms. Some are graduated to IP addresses and some use domain names. Especially, DGA algorithm detection, and it's coming into its own these days. So that's a pretty easy spot. It's really simple, like with bro, to do a cat on the DNS log and use brocut to quickly spot DGA algorithm, domain names, and identify the source machines. But you know what? Most people, they fail here because they're not even logging their DNS. Oh, our info blocks is 4 years old, and if we turn on queries for DNS logging, it's going to totally tank the system. Yeah, unfortunately, you kind of need that data, because that's one of the tools that the hackers are using. So, I have very rarely ever seen anybody at this level of the pyramid or higher. So, what I'm trying to do is work on each case as we come up with incidents to make sure that we get customers moving from here, moving from immaturity. So an incident response for me is no longer just about cleanup. It's not about getting rid of the ransomware, getting it off their systems, restoring their data, and getting operations back. I'm trying to fix their maturity level as well, because I don't want to have to go back again. Now, of course, McAfee would like me to go back again and charge them another, I don't know, many thousands of dollars we cost for a week. But I don't want to. I want to try and make InfoSec better. So, try and get them from here and move them up. So how do we do that? Well, I start with saying, let's start with the cyber kill chain to explain to you what happens in an incident and the different points at which you can attempt to stop the bad guys on your network. And now I just said cyber. Now I just said it twice. All right, so that's 2 drinks later for Bill Gardner. So, aside from the cyber kill chain, that's a good starting point, but I'm not terribly fond of that specific model. It's a simple way to get started with the conversation. But I actually prefer, and in most of the Foundstone talks, we like to bring out the MITRE attack. So it's simply attack.mitre.org. They've taken it to a slightly different level because we can then look at that chain and go through the pieces, and of course we want to try and get further that way in our prevention and detection mechanisms. But what a lot of people don't see when they see this is that within that last bit are all of these other things that we can be looking for. And then there are things that if we examine these and look for prevention systems, things that mitigate these risks, we can go a long way towards improving our security so that there isn't another incident in your organization, because you can have a nice little matrix. So for all of those things that were listed on the right on the previous slide, I can now look at all of the possible things for persistence, for privilege escalation, for credential access, etc. And then explain to them that if you apply controls for PowerShell execution. How many of you have ever been in an organization where everybody and their dog can run PowerShell? It's a fair number of them. PowerShell's great. PowerShell's also bad. It's great for administration. It's useful for a lot of things. It's useful for automation. But if anybody and their dog can run it, so can hackers, which means I can now run an in-memory PowerShell script that does bad things, that never touches the file system of the computer, so the endpoint protections don't work. And Bob's your uncle. I run Mimikatz in memory, thanks to PowerShell. And I pass the hash, and I have domain admin in less than 2 minutes, and the person's thinking, wow, how did that happen? Those Foundstone guys are really good. No, not really. It just is one of those things. So looking for ways in which you mitigate these things. So PowerShell, don't let everybody run PowerShell. Make it an admin privilege thing. The number of places that I still go to where, guess what? The password for the local admin is on every system, and that it's the same password on every system. They're still not using the new local account password management thing from Microsoft. So, trying to get them to move the bar to not have further incidents is one of the things we're trying to do. I don't like having to go in all the time and just be like, for fuck's sake, what are you doing this for? Because, reality of attacks, for example, on the power grid, the amount of cyber attacks on the power grid is off the charts. Why do we still have these issues with power grids? Actually, this is a lie. This is squirrel attacks on the power grid. And the amount of actual cyber attacks on the power grid is currently still 0. It's only a matter of time, of course. So, pulled up some NCIS rules for some of the takeaways for incident response and things that we do when we're on site. Never let suspects stay together. Don't believe what you were told, double check. You don't waste good, never take anything for granted. I have to tell you the amount of times where people pull out their network diagrams, and how old are the diagrams? Do they actually match reality? No, of course not. So the diagrams don't match reality. They have no idea what's actually on their network. They have no idea where their data is. So you can definitely never take anything for granted. Never get personally involved in a case, which also means you're an idiot if you connect your own laptop to their network before you've cleaned everything up. Bend the line, don't break it. Always work as a team. If you feel like you're being played, you probably are. There's no such thing as coincidence. Clean up your mess, and sometimes you're wrong. The last one can always be a tough one for us because we don't like to be wrong. So, the point is see so much stupid stuff in client sites. And we continually have incidents. We continually have buffer overflows. We continually have misconfigured firewalls. We continually have people not paying attention to anything that their IPS is telling them. They set up their IPS 3 years ago. They haven't touched it since. It's generating all kinds of alerts, mostly false positives. So even the tools they have are wasted. Then we go in, do an incident response, and they want to do the cool stuff that we just did, but they have no idea even how to do the basics, much less do something as complicated as IR. So we go in now and we try and make IR better, not only for just cleaning up the incident. There are plenty of consultancies that'll parachute in, clean up the malware, and go. And I guarantee you that same client's going to be in the news another 6 months later, all over again, because they've got the same issue still. Why? Because they didn't change anything. So the bar rescue guy, 40 of the 121 bars, that's about 33% of every bar that guy supposedly saved, failed. Again. After he went in and did all that fun stuff to make a great TV show. So why is that? I think the number one reason, and this is just my gut instinct, is that people have routines. Bad habits are hard to break. And so in organizations, we go in and we do that whole thing with, here's the kill chain, here's MITRE's attack principles, here's where you're deficient in all of these controls. So fix these things and you're going to be better at what you're doing. Come up with an incident response plan. Come up with backup and disaster recovery if you haven't sorted that out, and make sure you got all the pieces in place for that. But I'm still concerned that even these organizations, I'm going to be back again later because they're going to fall back into old bad habits. So that's probably the biggest challenge I think that we face in InfoSec. You can go in, how many of you doing the pen testing stuff, do a pen test and say, by the way, here's all the crap that's wrong in your firewall, fix these rules, and you'll improve your security. Right? How many times do you think that happens, and guess how borked those firewalls rules are a year later? Right? Entropy happens, and bad habits are hard to break. So that's what we're working on. Anybody has any ideas on how to fix that better? Please let me know. So, a little shorter than I thought it was going to be. Don't have a fancy demo or anything like that. But I hope you found it interesting. If you like to talk about anything incident response related or whatever, I love talking about that stuff. You want to hear the history of B-Side to DC?